Nothing quite beats that feeling of playing RuneScape as a kid. I found myself doing 3 activities more than anything else. Slaying moss giants because I always wanted to get higher numbers with my weapons. Mining rocks in Al-Kharid. When I finally could mine adamant, I felt like the best player in the world. And lastly, fishing lobsters in Karamja, hoping my parents wouldn't catch me on the computer late at night. You might be thinking the way I made money back when I was younger was through something like slaying moss giants. It was actually through fishing lobsters. That's how I could finally afford my full set of Gothics trimmed. What's changed? Why don't people skill anymore? What has led to the decline of skilling in RuneScape? Skilling has such a broad spectrum, and it can be broken down into groups like gathering, processing, utility-based skilling. While I think that skilling as a whole is on that slow decline, I want to focus mostly on the aspects I think are most impacted. That is sort of your gathering group, your mining, woodcutting, fishing. Those are the ones I believe that are under the most attack, but I think you'll notice some other trends and other skills like hunter and runecrafting come up in this video as well. In order to understand the decline of skilling, I think we need to also understand the evolution of bossing in RuneScape. Early RuneScape, the bosses were fairly limited, both in terms of numbers, but especially in terms of mechanics. A lot of early bosses like KBD, KQ, Barrows, Giant Mole, they didn't really have many mechanics to them. Like, there were definitely a few things, but it didn't require much thought. In fact, outside of a couple notable bosses like probably Jad, maybe DKs and God Wars, there wasn't much to any of the bosses that existed. This is the case for pretty much all the first 20 bosses in RuneScape, or at least our version of the game, old school RuneScape, but then a new challenger arrived. Zulrah. Zulrah was the boss with definitely the most mechanics we've ever seen included in one boss. It had different phases, rotations, snakelings, venom clouds. On top of that, it required both gear changes and prayer switches, which is something we had rarely seen up until this point. After Zulrah, PVM was on a different path. It was all gas, no drops. We had Serb, Sire, Chambers, Inferno, Vorkath, Grotesque Guardians, Theater of Blood, Hydra, Seracnus, The Gauntlet, Nightmare, TOA, Muspa, Desert Treasure. It does not stop, and we have more coming this year. When we talk about the golden age of old school RuneScape, I think a large part of it has to do with the evolution of PVM. Players have been given something more challenging and have responded by becoming better and better with the game. And we have gone from hitting a giant mole to fighting a giant soul. So we're in this golden age of PVM that pretty much started when Zulrah came out, but what updates have we seen to skilling since then that have really pushed the needle for skilling, evolved it? Not much. There's definitely been countless methods added. We've got new fish to do, trees to chop, rocks to mine, sure. But what updates have actually really changed the way this skill works in some ways? For mining, they did rework some of the rocks in terms of how you get them, and that's really nice. It makes mining a little bit better, but that's just a quality of life thing more than anything else. We got blast mining and volcanic mine, I suppose, but not many people do those. For woodcutting, forestry is definitely a big one. It did evolve the skill at some levels. Mixed reception, definitely, but I do also just like the social aspect of woodcutting now. It's a more fun activity for sure. Now fishing, I don't know, maybe Mulch Island, the way you get the fish are a little bit differently than traditional fishing. I guess it's technically a hunter update as well, but not everyone's favorite, definitely. But there is a class of updates that people seem to enjoy by and large, and it seems like a skill is good or bad depending on if this new thing is good or bad, and that is a mini game. There are tons of skilling mini games that we have that have really made skills better in a lot of ways. We have fishing with Temporos, agility with Sepulcher, fire making has Wintertodd, RC has Guardians of the Rift, Herblore, Mixology, Mining, Volcano, Hunter, Rumors, Farmer, Contracts, and now Fletching will have its own. So many skills have their own mini game. Now, mini games are honestly pretty fantastic at making a skill better, but we should be using them sparingly. Not everything should become a mini game, and we need to keep in mind some criteria that makes some mini games better than the other. I think one of those criteria is just how much that minigame affects the skill outside of the minigame. So I think something like Tempuras, for example, I really like Tempuras mostly because it has spirit flakes. That makes fishing better outside of the minigame. You can catch more fish with spirit flakes. I actually wish the reward pool would give more spirit flakes and less actual fish to incentivize people to use the spirit flakes more. Guardians of the Rift has the outfit, which is obviously really, really good, but you're also using the actual altars while you're rune crafting during the minigame, which is just a great way to tie that in and make it feel like organic to the skill. I think hunter rumors are similar in that sense too. Instead of being locked into one area to do your hunter rumors, you're going everywhere in Gielinor to do those rumors, which I think mostly is a positive thing for people. Now, some of the not so good minigames are probably the ones that don't really impact the skill outside of that area, and this would be stuff like Wintertod. Honestly, it was the first kind of minigame of this type we've seen, so it did really good for its time, but since then I think we've gotten better at making sure that the minigames impact the skill largely. Enough about that tangent. We know that skilling hasn't evolved as much as PVM. It makes sense because of how popular PVM is as well. Maybe some people just enjoy the simplicity of skilling, being able to hit a rock or swing an axe at a tree and get a resource. At least those people can do that, focus on it, and make a lot of money doing it, right? Making money through skilling is largely pretty bad. There are a couple of things that are good for skilling, like thieving methods, there's some good ones, rune crafting methods, there's some good ones, but when we're talking about some of the other ones, especially gathering skills, it is very, very bad. Fishing, you get maybe 200 to 400k an hour with the best methods. Mining, usually around 250k, maybe 600k if you do like Runite rocks. Woodcutting, like 130 to 160k from woodcutting. You'll get more money from 1 hour of Ardorvis than you'll get from cutting magic trees for 60 hours. Why is it that you can't make money through skilling methods like this? It's not that these resources aren't valuable, especially in fishing and mining. Fish is super important for pretty much all aspects of the game. And mining, I mean, you got stuff like coal, which is used to smith every single bar in the game outside of ones that you get from drops. So how is it that those aren't worth getting yourself? Well, it's because we have a resource bloat in PVM drop tables. If you take a look at drop tables, you'll be able to see that many of them have drops that give you hundreds of resources at once. This pretty much started when Zulrah came out, funnily enough. So while Zulrah was the birth of PVM and pushed us in a great direction, it introduced these tables that had tons of resources, absolutely crashing the need to go gather them yourself. If we take a look at coal, you make like a measly 50k an hour mining coal. That is like 300 or so coal in an hour. It's pretty bad. If you look at the drop tables for coal, there are about 30 things in PVM that drop anywhere from 100 to well over 1,000 coal in a single drop. It is not uncommon for me to go to Chambers or Tob and, finish the raid and get over 1,000 coal. And that's considered a bad drop, getting 1,000 coal in 30 minutes. And honestly, opportunity cost, hey, I might just get a purple along the way as well. And this isn't the only case. Pretty much all tables you look at do something. Vardorvis can drop 300 sharks. Brimstone keys can drop like 250 sharks. I believe like Laren's keys also drop well into the hundreds of sharks. You know what was the best way to get fish back when I was a kid? Fishing them. I know, right? Crazy. Not only did PVM become better and better, but PVM is also taking the gerbs of skillers. There is like no reason for me to get my own magic logs, food, herbs, whatever it is, when I can just fuel most of that just by doing PVM. Hell, even the bots have moved on from traditional skilling. Like, we rarely see bot farms huddled around a yew tree anymore. They're doing PVM instead. They're doing Zulrah. They might even be doing Soul Wars because the crates give so many things. Like, those crates give a ton of runes. It is a miracle that runes are actually fairly profitable to make, and that's really only because we use so many of them. But what can we do to save skilling or evolve it further? Well, obviously skilling updates help. I know not everybody loves minigames, but let's be honest, a lot of the minigames we've seen have been very good for their respective skills. A lot of people call minigames like Fishing Todd, Herblore Todd, etc. Winter Todd leaves a bit of a bad flavor in people's mouth, but Winter Todd is the worst example of a skilling minigame we've seen, and it's largely because it's the first one they've ever made. I think they've become better, and I think they've found ways to either incorporate a mini game or an activity into the wider game, or make the rewards affect the outside part of the skill much more. I think if they do more of this, we can see some really great mini games come into the game that will help to revive skilling a little bit more. The big thing they can work on to really improve skilling is completely changing their philosophy around drop tables in PvM. First thing they can do is make tables heavily focused towards the uniques rather than the resources when it comes to making money. Now, we've already seen them do this in some ways, so we see this mostly with God Wars Dungeon, Nex, Nightmare, and sort of with Desert Treasure too. This, in my opinion, is healthy for skilling, and you can still make a lot of money through PvM. However, they can really botch this like they did with Nightmare. Nightmare, you can go like 100 hours without getting a drop, so if you're not making any resources as well, those 100 hours just feel horrible. I think God Wars Dungeon is a really good balance where you'll make a little bit of money here and there, but you'll still get a unique drop fairly often, so you're going to get that big boost of money. So I think they should do more of that, definitely. Secondly, if a table is going to drop resources, the rawer the state, the better. So typically you want something to drop seeds, not herbs, ores, not bars, wood, not planks, etc. That way somebody still has to engage in the skilling in order to make the most out of it. I think overall they already kind of do this, but there are some examples of finished resources dropping like planks and herbs, bars as well, but bars are a little bit different because you still have to smith them, but those can be tweaked to raw resources. This, in my opinion, solves a lot of the processing issues when it comes to skilling, but it doesn't solve the gathering aspect. So how can Jagex solve for this issue with raw gathered resources? Well, I actually think something they're doing with Yama could be the key to solving this. Yama is going to be dropping diabolical worms. What these worms will do is enable you to catch anglers at a faster rate. At first this feels a little bit out of place, but essentially, instead of Yama just dropping 25 raw anglers, you'll instead get these worms and you'll take them to the angler fishing spot to get your anglers. It's kind of like PvM with extra steps, sure, but at least you're engaging with fishing on your downtime, and there's a way to balance this to make it rewarding. It is super critical that Jagex nails the balancing on these worms because I think they could indicate if we're going to be doing more of this in the future or not. The value of the drop needs to make sense for what it's essentially replacing. So if Yama would typically drop 25 raw anglers, which is worth about 37k gold, then these worms need to definitely surpass that value because you need to go out of your way to fish them. You can't just give us 25 worms as a replacement because then it's just a much worse drop, I suppose. You need to balance out two factors. One, how much faster are we gathering the anglers? And then two, how many worms we're getting. If we are gathering the anglers like super quickly, like you're there for like a minute, you get a full inventory, then I suppose you can give less worms. But if you're gathering them quicker, but it's not like that quick, like it's still going to take you time and you're going to sit there for, 5 minutes or so, which I think is pretty normal for anglers, then you got to give more worms, right? And it's going to be this balancing act of making sure you're rewarding players effectively. I think overall, you probably want to give us at least 2 times the amount of worms you would give us for anglers, and the time to fish those up would probably take you about 2 or 3 Yama KC. Like that's just some rough numbers you can like move around, but you need that cost benefit to make sense. If this is successful, I think Jagex should start to implement this in both future and existing content. I think an easy target for existing content would be Skatizo, strictly because he's a demon that drops 60 raw anglers. Like you could pretty much swap out that angler drop with diabolical worms, provided it's the correct number of worms, and I mean he's a demon. It fits him completely. But of course, the big thing here is this isn't just for anglers or just for fishing. Like you could expand this to other types of gathering or skilling resources. So for example, why not have some sort of imbued essence drops in the future that allow you to craft runes at like an increased rate instead of just dropping the rune drop? Or maybe use the extract from the Scar Essence, which already exists and we know how that works. And of course, you'd want to implement something hopefully down the line for wood cutting and ores once you kind of think about it more. But overall, I think this is a great direction to go. What do you think of skilling in old school Runescape? Is this something you still participate in? Are you optimistic for the future? Or do you think Jagex should kind of just focus on PvM and leave skilling behind?